What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. We're coming to you live. Well, it's definitely not live. You're going to get this in the morning. But from Boston, at least Chris and I are. Jimmy's back at home holding it down in Cleveland. But Chris, we are getting ready to enter TD Garden, one of the biggest arenas and most hyped up atmospheres of the playoffs, especially with this Boston Celtics team with a lot of playoff expectations. Just what are you looking forward to get this series started and just to be back in TD Garden, especially with how the regular season ended between these two teams?
Yeah, honestly, guys, I'm just looking forward to seeing how the Cavs match up with the best team in the Eastern Conference. Look, they took a critical step as an organization by winning a first-round series against Orlando, and we talked about it on the previous podcast. It doesn't matter that it went 7 games. It doesn't matter that it was extremely competitive. It doesn't matter that it took 7 games for the Cavs to beat an opponent like the Magic. You don't downplay playoff series wins. You don't start qualifying playoff series wins. This was a massive step for the organization as a whole to do it without LeBron James for the first time in 3 decades, to show that they grew as a team, to show that they learned from some of their mistakes and some of their roster composition flaws in the series against the Knicks last April. And now, to me, it's about, okay, they took that step. It was really, really important. Now a lot of the pressure is off of them. A lot of the expectations have changed. They can be more free. They can be more loose. And I'm curious to see. I think going into the series against the Magic, the majority of people felt like the Cavs were the better team. And by the end of the 7 games, they showed that. Now I think it's about them taking the next step and trying to figure out, okay, how do we stack up with the best team in the Eastern Conference, despite the fact that the Celtics are probably going to be without Kristaps Porzingis, if not for the entire series, a majority of the series. It's kind of, to me, a measuring stick type playoff series. And if they don't perform well against Boston, it can still be informative in terms of like what kinds of things they need to do to then take the next step as an organization.
That last part, Chris, is a real nice way of saying if they get whooped on, people might get traded still.
Yep.
This is a big next step, a humongous next step. The Celtics, Porzingis or no Porzingis, just have so few weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Like offensively, 4 guys who can pass, shoot, and dribble. I mean, you could argue Horford is can do like a half of each of those things. So it's a really fluid offense. Defensively, we talked about it on the last podcast. Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Who you picking on? I don't know. All those guys are elite defenders at their position and can guard multiple positions.
Mm-hmm.
And the Cavs have players who can match them in maybe half of that equation a lot of the time. Like, we're talking one-way versus two-way players here, but like the Cavs version of a Drew Holiday, Derek White double defender is Isaac Okoro, who the Celtics aren't going to guard. So like that's just a hard thing to overcome. Boston is just so fluid, and they have, put it this way, they are the only team in the playoffs to have a top 3 offense and a top 3 defense in the first round.
Right.
They are so complete, and the Cavs are talented, but a little bit more scattershot in the way that talent has been assembled and is developing, I guess.
And you can say this too, going into the series against Boston. 28% from 3-point range, like the Cavs shot against the Orlando Magic, that is not going to fly against the Celtics. You've got to make 3-pointers to keep up with Boston. If you think about Boston's first round matchup against Miami, the only game that the Heat won in the series, they made 23 3-pointers. So you're going to have to make shots against this Celtics team. You're going to have to make threes specifically against this Celtics team. And I said it on the previous podcast, and I truly believe this. The only team in the Eastern Conference that I believe can beat a whole, complete Celtics team is Boston. They have a tendency to play down to their competition. They have a tendency throughout the course of games to play with their food. They have a tendency to get a little bit too 3-point happy, and obviously there's shooting variance that goes with that. In saying all of that, there's so much talent, there's so much skill, there's so much versatility, there's so much switchability, there's so much in terms of 3-level scoring, there's so much in terms of two-way players. It's as complete of a roster that I think you can get in today's era, where you have to pay stars and you have to worry about luxury tax and the second apron and all that kind of stuff. It is going to be a stiff challenge for the Cavs in this particular series. And for them, their defense is built to take away the paint. Their defense is built to protect the rim. Their defense is not built to stop the 3-point shot. They were one of the worst defensive teams in terms of 3-pointers throughout the course of the regular season. So they might have to do some different things in terms of scheme, in terms of rotations, in terms of strategy, to combat what the Celtics want to do most, which is shoot the 3-ball.
3 balls will be there for Cleveland, by the way, just to that point real quick. Like, the Celtics in shifting their defense to block off the rim, they ask their guards to do a lot around screens. So pull-up threes will be there for Darius and Donovan if they can hit them.
I think the player to watch this series for the Cavs, at least, is Isaac Okoro, to me, because of how much he can impact the game on the defensive end, but also how much his 3-point shooting could spread the floor and also help create shots for Donovan and Darius, like we've talked about. Because we've seen when J.B. Bickerstaff has had to go up against a kind of lengthy team that has good shooters, that especially when Jared Allen is out and his availability is still unknown for game 1. He's questionable for game 1 against the Boston Celtics in TD Garden on Tuesday. And Dean Wade's still out. He's out for game 1. So you might see Isaac Okoro slid back into that starting lineup like he was in game 7 because of what he brings defensively and how much Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Derek White, like, they had 3 different players averaging 20 points in the first round series. That's an insane measurement. The Cavs, I believe, had 4 players in double figures. Like, 1 player who reached 20 points, and that player was Donovan Mitchell. So, knowing that the Celtics are going to be a gauntlet to run through in themselves by the defensive end and the offensive end, Isaac Okoro does a little bit of both. And especially with Dean Wade out, who does both of those things for the Cavs, the eyes are going to be on Isaac and how long is his leash going to be for if he's going to be productive on the offensive end, because we know what he's capable of on the defensive end. But my question to you guys is, how do you want to do this? You want to work backwards and give our takes first and see where we're at and go from there? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. So, this series comes down to what? We talked about the firepower. We talked about the defense. We got to also talk about the coaching mashup, because J.B. Bickerstaff has, let's say, more coaching experience, but not more playoff experience than the Celtics coach, because the Celtics coach is in his second season of coaching at the head coaching position, and J.B. Bickerstaff's been with the Cavs alone for 5 years. So I think the difference between those two is that JB Bickerstaff is still going to have to tinker with his lineups and figure out which rotations are working in any given scenario, while Boston Celtics coaches are always going to know that one of their starting five is going to be able to do something against the Cavs, if not multiple of them. And if they're switching, it's like, well, we got to find a different weapon. And it's probably still going to be one of our starting five, especially if Kristaps Porzingis is able to return to the series. Chris, what are your thoughts coming into the coaching battle and the chess match that is going to be between these two coaches?
Well, look, I mean, I think the thing when it comes to JB is that, this isn't Rick Carlisle on the other side. You know what I mean? This isn't Nick Nurse on the other side. I thought Joe Mazzulla had a really good series against the Miami Heat, but, part of the reason why I think it made it come across as him making the right adjustments, pushing the right buttons, doing the things that he needed to do from a coaching perspective is because he had the Jimmies and the Joes on his side. It's a lot easier to make schematic adjustments. It's a lot easier to run the proper ATOs. It's a lot easier when it comes to X's and O's when you have Derek White going for 30 plus points, when you have Kristaps Porzingis pulling defenders away from the rim and knocking down 27, 28-foot three-pointers, when you have Jason Tatum being able to do all the dynamic things that he can do offensively, and the same thing when it goes to Jaylen Brown. So I do think it's easier for somebody like Joe Mazzulla because he has more chess pieces that can move in different ways. But I certainly think he did a good job in the first round series against the Heat. But in saying that, this isn't Tom Thibodeau. He doesn't have that level of experience, right? This isn't Rick Carlisle, who is considered, an elite playoff caliber coach. This isn't Nick Nurse. This isn't Michael Malone. So for JB, I thought he did some good things in the Magic series. I thought he did some questionable things in the Magic series. The difference is the margin for error has shrunk significantly. Like the things that the Cavs were able to get away with against the Magic, the things that JB was able to get away with as a coach in terms of how quickly the adjustments came, in terms of how quickly he was willing to remove guys from the rotation. A bad 3-5 minute stretch from a coaching perspective when it comes to JB could turn a game from close, competitive to a Boston runaway. They have that much firepower. They have that much skill and talent at both ends of the floor too. So to me, the biggest thing that stands out is that the margin for error that JB has compared to Joe Mazzulla is significantly different. And this is the kind of series where JB is going to have to do something or some things to try and tilt the axis toward the Cavs. Can he be that kind of coach who, not to sit here and say, is he a detriment to the team's success? No, it's can he be the kind of coach that gives them some kinds of advantages throughout the course of the series? And I think that's one of the questions that a lot of people have about JB.
I agree with that, so that sentiment exists. I also just don't know how fair it's going to be to judge him specifically, JB Bickerstaff specifically, based on what happens in this series. I think honestly, from a coaching evaluation standpoint, JB, I don't want to say there's more. I'll say this: there's more room for upward mobility than downward mobility for JB in terms of his stock in this series. Because if you get beaten by the Celtics thoroughly, let's say, I think a lot of people might just say they're really good.
Sure.
Like we've been talking about over and over again. They had the best record in the NBA by 7 games. They had posted the best scoring differential since 2016-17 Golden State, the first year of Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. It's not the Cavs are heavy, heavy, heavy underdogs on paper. So I think actually, like, if the Cavs push or were able to win this series, that just does like I would think way more highly of JV Bickerstaff than I do now, than I would think lower of him if they lost in embarrassing fashion. Now, that being said, I don't know that that's how the fan base will feel about this, and I don't know that that's the way the front office would react if, again, to use a euphemism, the Celtics beat the Cavs thoroughly in this series. So I'm in this weird middle space with JB where I kind of think from the way I look at JB, he's playing with house money, in my opinion, in this series. But I still think he could be coaching for his job to some degree, just because of the way Donovan Mitchell's goals are a little bit higher for the organization than the organization might have for might have reasonable expectations for with the young core, I think. So that's a weird dichotomy that exists for JB here. I think there's not a ton he can do to swing the series except for sprinkle some dust on the team to have them make a bunch of threes. At the same time, I think there's real pressure on him in terms of job security.
And I think that's an interesting point because we talk about JB's expectations for this team. We talk about Donovan Mitchell literally coming to the podium after his performance in Game 7 and saying that he did not come here to just win the first round. Max Strus issued nearly the same sentiment while Donovan was talking in the locker room. So this is a team that has multiple different players that want to get to the next round, want to get to the next level and take the next step for this team. Obviously, we understand that there are people in this organization that already see this season as a success, but some people see that the first round series win was just the first step, was just basically bare minimum. And I think what's interesting is how often this team has been counted out. And I said this in yesterday's podcast when we were talking about this slightly. I really do think, like, every time the Cavs have been counted out this season, they've been able to showcase something that not a lot of people expected. Like when Evan Mobley and Darius Garland were injured, and Dean Wade coming back from a 22-point deficit in the fourth quarter against the Boston Celtics, no less. And then also we think about the Dallas Mavericks game. Like, all of those different things kind of combine to make you think, like, the Cavs are willing to surprise anybody because of what they've been able to accomplish this season and what they've endured this season as well. So I think that's where I would start. Is like, this is going to be a dogfight, and this is not something that a lot of people expect to happen. But who knows how far this Cavs team is going to go, especially with how we saw Donovan Mitchell willing this team and how the rest of the Cavs fandom kind of came together in Game 7 and pushed them to the next limit. Like, I think it's going to be a tall task. I think it's going to be very difficult, but who knows? I don't think I'm willing to count this Cavs team out just yet because of everything we've seen this season. But that might be me being overly optimistic for this team. Chris, what do you think? I see you making a face.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they did against the Celtics in the regular season. It doesn't matter what they did against the Mavericks in the regular season. This is Boston in a 7-game series. This is a different level of focus required. This is a different level of attention to detail. This is a different level of intensity. This is a different level of quality that you need to come up with that the Cavs simply did not show against the Orlando Magic in the 7-game series. And yes, they won that series and they deserve credit for it. And it was a big step forward for the organization. But I'm not sure how anybody could have watched that series against Orlando. And yes, they're playing against a different team. Boston's not as long as the Magic. Boston's not as good defensively as the Magic. Boston doesn't have as much physicality and as many dogs on the defensive end of the floor as the Magic. But I just don't understand how you could watch that series against the Magic and how much the Cavs struggled to consistently generate offense, how much they struggled on the road, and how much they struggled at times with containing certain guys off the dribble. Like, that was the Magic. This is the Boston Celtics. This is the best team in the Eastern Conference. It's going essentially, and this is no disrespect to the Magic, but it's going to come across this way anyway. This is going from JV to varsity basketball, right? I mean, this is going from algebra to calculus. It's just a different level of everything required from the Cavs that they just have not shown me consistently enough that they can reach for me to sit here and say that they're going to push Boston, or they're going to be competitive in this series, or they're going to potentially win this thing. If you guys know anything about gambling or odds, I think this tells you all you need to know. The Celtics to win this series are like minus 450. Think about that. On paper, this looks like a mismatch. Basketball games aren't played on paper, but I just don't see a pathway to the Cavs winning this series. I have a hard time seeing a pathway to the Cavs being competitive in this series.
That for the people at home who don't gamble, that means you have to bet $450 to win $100 for the Celtics to win this series. Just so we understand each other. Yeah, think about it this way. One aspect of the game. The Cavs would not score against the Magic. They had the second worst playoff offense in round one against the Magic. The Celtics defense is at least as good as, if not particularly in the playoffs, better, given all the playoff experience they have. And unlike the Magic, the Celtics are very well equipped to make the Cavs pay for turnovers, bad misses. I shouldn't say unlike the Magic. They are way better equipped than the Orlando Magic to take advantage of bad offensive possessions of any kind. Boston in transition, it's a handful. That's where they get a lot of their threes. The Cavs have struggled with live ball turnovers in this postseason, and to Chris's point, it's like 7-game series against the Boston Celtics, or 6 or 5, I don't know, against a team that the one knock against them is they don't play in enough close games, right? Like they blow too many teams out, so they kind of lose their focus, or they lose the repetition of playing in close games. So they struggle in that situation. You got to get them there. And as we saw in the first, in 2 of the regular season matchups, the Celtics take big swings at both ends, right? Like they went up huge on the Cavs in the Dean Wade game, trademark as we're calling it from here to forth. And the Cavs came back. The Cavs jumped out to what was it, 18-4? One of those Boston games in December. I don't want to use, again, it's regular season, and Donovan Mitchell didn't play in one. I think Evan Mobley didn't play in the other 2, so not very forward. I'm just using those anecdotes to explain to you, like, because of the 3-point shooting, because of the pace they play with, prepare yourself for some 10, 15, maybe plus 0 runs. And what do we know? What concerned us the most about the Cavs in that last series? How they responded to those runs. And again, this time they're dealing with a team that is way better at least as good at everything that Orlando did, and way better at most of the other stuff.
All right. I think we're to the point of this podcast where we can get into our selections, because obviously I think there is a clear consensus on all of our fronts that we do not believe that the Cavs are going to win this series. That's clear cut, but I want to see how many games you guys think it's going to take. I think that's the most interesting portion of this. And Jimmy, I'm going to let you go first because I want to see what Chris goes second.
I have Celtics in 5. I have the Cavs winning a game where they make a bunch of threes, and the Celtics, maybe it's 2-0. Maybe the Celtics won pretty comfortably the first 2 games. It's crazy to say this in the playoffs, but they have reached this status where sometimes they don't always take their playoff opponents seriously. I think you saw a little bit of that when Miami made a bunch of threes in that game 2 loss that Boston had in the first round. Again, I think there are paths for the Cavs to throw a few punches in moments, in short stints. Pull-up threes are going to be there. Boston plays a little small. If Jared Allen, well, that's a whole nother conversation. But if Jared Allen blank, I don't know, there will be some opportunities for rebounding. But the offense, it's a bunch of skilled guys playing with a ton of space out there. And oh, by the way, they are crazy shot makers, even if the offense breaks down. Particularly Tatum and Brown you'll be punching your pillow with some of the stuff they can do to you in the late clock just by pulling up, using their size, using step back moves to create separation. And then at the other end, again, they have so many good defensive players. They have so many interchangeable defensive players. Again, I think when you go to the second units will be pretty important in this series when guys like Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser on the floor have the opportunity to go after those guys. Darius Garland, the guards, Garland, Karis LeVert, who had a nice game 7. Opportunities for you in those situations. Try to get guys switched on you and pick and roll attack. Those will be very important because there won't be quite as many of those during when both teams are at full strength out there. But yeah, the Cavs have not proven to us that they are a quality playoff offense, which is only going to feed into Boston's already very good offense. And I think that there's going to be a couple of ugly games. It will be the kind of series we've been discussing, where it's a thorough Boston victory. And even though the Cavs have taken this important step on the ladder, I think we might still be having some bigger picture conversations about the Cavs at the end of the series.
The Magic were really good at home. They were 29-12 at home during the regular season. You know what Boston was at home? 37-4. You know how many road games JB Bickerstaff has won as a head coach in the playoffs?
Less than 4?
0. Never won a game on the road in the playoffs as a coach. It's just the home court advantage is so significant for the Celtics. The way that they play at home versus on the road, it's relatively drastic for a team that is as talented and as good as the Celtics. I think there's a small opening for the Cavs with the Porzingis thing because it changes the dynamics of the Celtics offensively. It also changes their versatility a little bit on the defensive end of the floor. Like Porzingis as a defender in isolation situations, that's a different challenge for the Cavs than somebody like Al Horford, who's much older, not as quick-footed, not as prolific as a shot blocker. So I do think there are going to be some advantages throughout the course of the series for the Cavs when it comes to switches and attacking those kinds of switches. I'm really going to be watching Karis LeVert. I think his ability in ISO situations is going to matter greatly. He's had some huge games against the Celtics. Now, they were regular season as opposed to the playoffs, but it shows you the kind of player that can attack the Celtics defense because of his capability in ISO situations. Same thing when it comes to Donovan. Same thing when it comes to Darius. They're going to have to win some one-on-one matchups here. They're going to have to make the Celtics pay for switching and creating what would appear to be some advantageous matchups for the Cavs when the Cavs are on offense. So, those things stand out to me as areas to watch. Obviously, you have to pay attention to the 3-point shooting and what kind of disparity there's going to be. How is Evan Mobley going to hold up? Bam Adebayo was the most impactful player for the Heat in their first round series against the Celtics. It didn't lead to a victory, of course. It led to just one victory. It didn't win to a victory in the series. But, there are going to be opportunities for Evan Mobley to capitalize on some mismatches, to take advantage inside, to get some second chance opportunities for this team the way that he did in Game 7. And we all know the kind of game record that he can be on the defensive end of the floor. So I think there are certain pockets throughout the course of a game and certain pockets throughout the course of the series where the Cavs can maybe possibly theoretically exploit and have some success with. But at the end of the day, it's about trying to beat the same team 4 times in 7 tries. I certainly don't see that happening. And I think the Cavs are going to struggle just to win a game in this series. But I have so much respect for Donovan Mitchell and the level that he played at in the final 2 games of the series against the Magic. So I think Donovan will go supernova at some point in one game, or the Cavs will make a whole bunch of threes, like Jimmy said, in one of the games. And I think the Cavs will find a way to get one. And I do think it's going to come back to Boston, but I can't see the Cavs getting more than one game in this series. I've got the Celtics in 5.
Real quick, the Celtics are very good at home. They also had a better record on the road than the Cavs did at home. 27-14 compared to 26-15. And I know we were all there. We've all felt the energy of how, like, home court advantage, you could argue, won the Cavs the first round series. Like, if the roles were flipped, if the Cavs had to go to Orlando for that Game 7, I don't know that we're here.
Yeah.
But the Boston Celtics are that good. I mean, not it's especially qualitative context I'm providing here, but
yeah,
they're essentially that good on the road.
I mean, I think every advantage that the Cavs had in the series against Orlando goes away. The experience, it doesn't matter anymore. The experience edge that the Cavs had over the Magic, that doesn't exist in this series against the Celtics. The home court advantage, the fact that the Cavs did not have to win a single game on the road to win that series, and that's the way it played itself out, that obviously goes away. The coaching advantage that you felt like JB Bickerstaff probably had, even if slight, going into that series against the Magic, that goes away because he may not have the pieces, the chess pieces, to make it actually matter. The chances of the Cavs having the best player in the series individually, that still exists. There's no doubt about it. Like, Donovan Mitchell can do some of the things that he did against the Magic in this series against the Celtics. There's no doubt. He is playing at an extremely high level. I think it certainly helps him to not play with 2 bigs. I think it allows him to get downhill a little bit easier. I think he took advantage of that in Game 6 and Game 7 against the Magic. And if Jared Allen is not able to play in Game 1, if he's not able to play in Game 2, I think there are going to be opportunities for Donovan again to attack the paint, get downhill, finish at the rim. But, like, going into that Magic series, you were saying, like, Donovan is the clear-cut best player in that series. He is the most ready player in that series. That was against Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. This is Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum's had some big-time moments in the playoffs throughout the course of his career. This is Jaylen Brown. So even if Donovan is the best player in this series against Boston, it's not going to be a significant gap the way that I felt like it was going to be in the series against Orlando. So you just keep going down the list. The Cavs had an advantage against the Magic theoretically from the shooting perspective, from the offensive perspective. And you keep going down this list of reasons why you picked the Cavs in that series against Orlando and the advantages that they had. And to me, it was about the weaknesses of the Magic that the Cavs were capable of exploiting. And it's like, I don't know where the Cavs' advantage lies in this series against Boston.
Yeah, and I think the point that I wanted to touch on that you made was the experience that the Magic lacked. And I think everybody in the Boston Celtics' starting five, not including Kristaps Porzingis because he's not playing in Game 1, has been to the NBA Finals. And the Cavs have 4 players who have been out of the second round.
Yeah.
So
I looked this up during the season. This was with Porzingis, who actually hasn't played that many playoff games. Their top 6, so Porzingis and the 5 guys who will be starting, average 83.5 career playoff games played.
Yeah.
That's a season.
Yeah, so that playoff experience goes out the window. Well, the discrepancy goes out the window. And it's really like, for me, I'm kind of in the same boat as Chris. Like, it's a respect thing, and it's also like I have seen this team do stupid things to teams that should not happen. Like that's
the
where
regular season.
Correct. That's fair. But I'm gonna stick with what I said. So I really do think like there's gonna be a Donovan Mitchell game, and then I have a feeling there's gonna be a Max Strus game. And for some reason, I don't feel like they happen on the same day. So I have I have Celtics at 6. But I do understand the difficulty of saying that they win 2 games because that it feels like a stretch to me. But somehow I feel like that they'll surprise me again because they've done it all season. But
to be fair, they have done some stupid things to some teams that we didn't expect in the playoffs, like lose to 40 to Orlando, lose by 40 to Orlando on the road.
Thank you for that one, Jimmy. I appreciate that. I needed that. I needed that. Come back to reality.
That'd be a fun, if we're talking about betting, the over-under for biggest blowout in this series would be interesting to me because Boston is capable of some ridiculous final scores.
I mean, 3 of their 4 wins in the first round were by 20 points, were they not? Like, they were just putting up numbers and holding the Miami Heat to nothing, especially without Jimmy Butler. That goes without saying. But I think that wraps up today's episode, unless, Chris, you want to jump in and add something else to end the pod.
Nope. I got nothing else to add at this point.
All right. That'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to subscribe to Subtext. Again, I'm going to say it. Chris Fedor is the man. He's got the insight. He's got the intel. He'll probably have some insight for you guys on not only Jared Allen, but also Dean Wade, who could return in this second round series. So if you want that insight, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to have your voice heard through all of the Cavs community. But that's all for now, and until next time, we'll see you after game 1. Y'all be safe. We out.